A story written by Moonrise Romance Library.
Chapter 1. The Invisible Daughter. The bucket handle bit into Lyra's palms as she hauled water from the well, her breath misting in the pre-dawn cold. 3 more trips. Always 3 more. The kitchen staff wouldn't touch a bucket she'd filled, said her scent contaminated the water. So she filled theirs first, then her own, her shoulders burning with each haul. Move faster, pig. Her mother's voice drifted from the main house, sharp enough to cut through the morning quiet. Lyra didn't flinch, hadn't flinched in years. She emptied the bucket into the barrel and turned back toward the well, her worn boots squelching through mud that never quite dried in the shadow of the estate. The main house rose before her, all warm stone and golden light spilling from windows where her family would be gathering for breakfast. Her stomach twisted, empty since yesterday's stale bread. The servants' entrance gaped dark to her left, her entrance, the only one she was permitted to use. Lyra, her father's bellow rattled the kitchen windows. The hearths better be lit before your sister wakes, or you'll sleep outside tonight. She'd already lit them, 2 hours ago while the house still slept, but he wouldn't remember and she wouldn't remind him. Reminding him only made it worse. Inside, the kitchen sweltered. She'd stoked the fires too high again, desperate to finish before dawn. Sweat plastered her dress to her back as she scrubbed pots crusted with last night's feast, a feast she'd prepared but hadn't been allowed to attend. Her sister Celia's laughter had echoed through the walls of Lyra's room, bright and cruel as broken glass. The beautiful Miss Celia, the guests had cooed. So graceful, so intelligent. And somewhere in those praises lived the unspoken truth, so unlike her sister. Lyra's hands moved mechanically through the wash water. Pot, scrub, rinse. The rhythm kept her mind quiet, kept the loneliness from swelling too large in her chest. She'd learned early that feelings were luxuries she couldn't afford. There you are, you worthless lump. Celia stood in the doorway, perfect in a dress of soft blue wool that matched her eyes. Everything about her gleamed, golden hair swept into an elegant twist, skin like fresh cream, a figure that made visiting wolves stumble over their words. At 19, she'd already refused 3 mating offers, waiting for someone worthy of her beauty. Waiting for an alpha. Mother wants her breakfast tray. Celia's lip curled as her gaze raked over Lyra. Try not to breathe on the food. Your scent is revolting enough without adding that. The door swung shut before Lyra could respond. Not that she would have. Speaking only prolonged these encounters, gave Celia more ammunition. Fat, unfit, wolfless, disgusting. The words had lost their sting somewhere around her 14th year, worn smooth by repetition, until they felt more like facts than insults. Lyra prepared the tray with steady hands, fresh bread, honey, sliced apples arranged just so. Her mother would find fault anyway, but Lyra had stopped trying to be perfect long ago. Survival didn't require perfection. It required invisibility. The walk to her mother's chambers took her through the main hall, where portraits of pack leaders stretched back generations. Strong wolves, everyone. Her father's portrait hung beside her grandfather's, both men captured mid-shift, power radiating from painted eyes. There would be no portrait of Lyra. Wolfless daughters didn't grace family walls. Her mother didn't look up when Lyra entered. Late again. Put it on the table and get out. Your sister needs her dress mended before tonight's gathering. Yes, mother. And Lyra, her mother's voice stopped her at the door. Stay in your room once you're finished. The Whitmore pack is visiting, and I won't have you embarrassing us. The door to her room clicked shut with a finality that Lyra had grown to cherish. Here, in the forgotten wing where servants once slept, she could breathe. The isolation her parents meant as punishment had become her sanctuary. She moved to the small desk beneath the window, where Celia's dress lay draped across her chair. The tear in the hem was deliberate. Celia had ripped it herself this morning. Lyra was certain. Just another excuse to keep her busy, keep her locked away. The needle slipped through fabric in neat, practiced stitches. Outside her window, the forest stretched dark and wild, calling to something deep in her chest that her family swore didn't exist. But it did exist. She felt it every day, that presence just beneath her skin, patient and powerful and waiting. A soft tap at the window made her heart leap. Benny's face appeared in the glass, grinning as she always did, her dark curls escaping from beneath her hood. Lyra rushed to unlatch the window, and her only friend tumbled through with practiced ease. "Miss me?" Benny pulled a cloth-wrapped bundle from inside her coat, her eyes bright with mischief and something else. Something that looked almost like pity, though Benny was too kind to let it show fully. "Always." Lyra took the bundle, her fingers trembling as she unwrapped it. A book, leather-bound, ancient, the title embossed in silver, Transformations of the First Wolves. "Found it in my grandmother's collection," Benny whispered. "Lyra, this one's different. It talks about wolves who shifted young, who learned control before their first ceremony." She gripped Lyra's hands. "It talks about wolves like you." The words hung between them, dangerous and thrilling. Lyra opened the book, and hope, that treacherous, beautiful thing she'd buried for so long, unfurled in her chest like wings. Chapter 2, Secret Strength. Lyra's fingers traced the silver lettering, her pulse drumming in her ears. The book felt warm in her hands, almost alive, as though the wolves described within still breathed between its pages. "Read the 3rd chapter first," Benny urged, perching on the narrow bed. "The part about early manifestation." Lyra flipped through brittle pages until the words caught her eye. The wolf does not wait for ceremony or permission. It waits only for recognition. Recognition. Her throat tightened. She'd been 17 when it started, that restless energy that crawled beneath her skin like lightning seeking ground. She'd thought it was anger at first, fury at another dinner spent alone while Celia entertained suitors in the dining hall. But anger didn't make her bones ache, didn't make her senses sharpen until she could hear conversations 3 rooms away. "It happened to you, didn't it?" Benny's voice was soft. "That's why you asked for the books." Lyra nodded, the memory flooding back. 4 years ago, locked in this same room after her father had struck her for burning his breakfast. She'd pressed her hands against the floor, trembling with something that felt nothing like pain and everything like power. Her fingernails had darkened, lengthened. For one terrifying, exhilarating moment, she'd felt her wolf rising to meet her rage. Then footsteps in the hall, and she'd swallowed it down, buried it deep where her family couldn't see. "The first book you brought me," Lyra whispered. "The one about ancient practices, it saved me. I would have lost control without it." She could still remember those desperate nights, following the exercises described in fatting ink. Breathing techniques to calm the shift. Meditation to separate her mind from the wolf's instincts. And finally, carefully, the instruction she'd been terrified to attempt. To shift is to surrender. To control the shift is to invite surrender on your terms. "Show me." Benny's eyes gleamed with the same wild curiosity that had made them friends years ago, when Benny had found Lyra crying behind the stables and hadn't looked away in disgust. Lyra glanced at the door, locked from the outside as always after sunset. Her family wouldn't check on her until morning. This room, this forgotten corner of the house, it was the one place she could be honest. She closed her eyes and reached for that presence inside her, the one that had been growing stronger with each passing season. The wolf met her halfway, eager and fierce. Her bones sang as they reformed. The pain was there, sharp and insistent, but she'd learned to breathe through it, to let it wash over her rather than drown in it. Fur rippled across her skin, white as fresh snow, and when she opened her eyes, the room had transformed into crystalline clarity. Benny's gasp sounded like thunder. "Lyra, you're beautiful." The wolf wanted to preen at the praise, but Lyra maintained control, shifting back with the same careful intention. Her human form settled around her like a familiar coat, and she sagged against the bed, breathless but triumphant. "I've been practicing," she managed, "every night." That had been 4 years ago. 4 years of secret strength, of mastering what her family swore she'd never possess. The memories shifted, darkening. Her 18th birthday and the mating ceremony she'd dreamed of attending. She'd heard the preparations from her locked room, music, laughter, the howls of young wolves celebrating their first official shifts. Her father had turned the key himself that morning. Wolfless creatures don't belong at ceremonies. You'll stay here and think about what a disappointment you are. She'd shifted anyway, alone in the dark, her white wolf prowling the small room with contained fury. The wolf had wanted to break through the door to show them all. But Lyra had held firm. Not yet. Not when they could still hurt her, still use her defiance as an excuse for worse cruelty. 19 had been different. No locked door that time, just her mother's saccharine smile as she handed Lyra a list of supplies to fetch from the far market. The ceremony isn't until sunset, but these are urgent. Don't come back until you have everything. The market was 2 hours away. By the time Lyra returned, exhausted and laden with packages, the ceremony had ended. She'd watched from the shadows as Celia recounted her shift to an admiring crowd, describing her golden wolf with theatrical flourishes. Lyra had shifted that night too, in the forest beyond the estate, letting her wolf run until her paws bled and her lungs burned. Freedom tasted like pine and starlight. Pain tasted like home. Then came 20, the year Celia had looked her in the eye over breakfast and smiled. "Mother, I really think Lyra should stay behind during the ceremony this year. It's my last chance before I'm 21, and I can't bear the thought of her ruining it. You know how the other packs talk." Their mother had agreed instantly. Their father had nodded, and Lyra had retreated to her room without argument because what was the point? They'd made their choice long ago. But that night, after the house had emptied and even the servants had left to watch the ceremony, Lyra had done something different. She'd shifted and climbed through her window, running through the forest parallel to the ceremony grounds, close enough to hear the howls of newly shifted wolves, close enough to smell the bonfire and fresh earth. Close enough to know exactly what she was missing. Her wolf had been magnificent in the moonlight, powerful and sure-footed. While Celia accepted congratulations for a shift that had taken her 3 painful attempts, Lyra had moved through the trees like water, silent and deadly and free. Each rejection had forged her stronger. Each locked door had taught her patience. Each cruel word had fed the determination burning in her chest. Now, at 21, with Benny's new book open before her and another ceremony looming, Lyra made a decision that felt less like choice and more like destiny. This time, she wouldn't hide. This time, they would all see exactly what they'd tried to bury. Chapter 3, The Mating Ceremony. The decision crystallized in Lyra's chest like ice forming over still water. Beautiful, sharp, irreversible. She waited until the house fell silent, until even her mother's footsteps had faded down the main hall toward the ceremony grounds. The key turned in her lock as it always did, trapping her inside while the rest of the pack celebrated outside. But her family had forgotten, or perhaps never known, that the window opened just wide enough for a determined girl to slip through. Lyra pulled on her only decent dress, a simple gray thing she'd sewn herself from fabric Benny had smuggled to her. It wouldn't compare to the silks and velvets the other females would wear, but it was clean and whole, and that would have to be enough. Her hands shook as she fastened the buttons. 4 years of secret strength, and still her heart hammered like a rabbit's when she imagined her father's face if he caught her. But beneath the fear ran something hotter, something that tasted like the forest at midnight. Enough hiding, enough waiting for permission that would never come. She dropped from the window into the overgrown garden below, her feet finding purchase on stones she'd memorized in darkness. The ceremony grounds lay a 1/4 mile through the woods, and already she could hear drums, smell smoke and pine, and the wild musk of wolves gathering. The back entrance to the grounds opened onto a slope overlooking the ceremonial circle. Torches blazed in a ring around the clearing, casting everything in shades of amber and shadow. Females lined one side, dozens of them, dressed in colors that rivaled the autumn leaves. Males stood opposite, watching with hungry eyes as the unmated females preened and postured. Lyra's stomach clenched. She didn't belong here. Every instinct screamed at her to run back to her room, to the safety of invisibility. Then she saw Benny in the crowd, and her friend's face split into a grin so fierce it could have started fires. Benny's nod was subtle but certain. You're exactly where you need to be." Lyra descended into the clearing, and the whispers started immediately. "Is that? No, it can't be. What is she doing here? Someone should tell her family. Their pet escaped." The females nearest her shifted away as though she carried plague. One girl, Marina, who'd pushed Lyra into the mud more times than she could count, wrinkled her nose dramatically. "Gods, even her presence here is an insult. Does she really think? I think she should be allowed the same chance as anyone else." The voice came from Lyra's left, quiet but firm. A girl she didn't recognize, with kind eyes and a scar across her jaw. Marina laughed. "A chance. She's wolfless. She'll humiliate herself and waste everyone's time." Lyra kept her expression smooth as river stones, even as the words tried to find purchase in her chest. She'd heard worse, survived worse. These girls had no idea what strength looked like. Then the drums changed rhythm, and the crowd fell silent. He entered from the north, and the air itself seemed to bend toward him. Alpha King Kael moved through the gathered wolves like a blade through water, effortless, inevitable, dangerous. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair pulled back to reveal a face carved from granite and shadow. But it was his eyes that struck her, amber, almost gold, burning with an intelligence that missed nothing. Power radiated from him in waves that made Lyra's wolf stir restlessly beneath her skin. Celia stood at the front of the female line, positioned perfectly in his path. She'd worn crimson tonight, a dress cut to showcase everything their mother's bloodline had given her. Her golden hair cascaded over bare shoulders, and her smile promised everything an alpha could want. Lyra watched her sister's confidence, the absolute certainty in her posture that this ceremony was merely a formality before her coronation as Luna. Kael began his walk through the females, his expression unreadable. Traditional law said he could choose anyone here, but tradition also whispered that alphas chose beauty, strength, perfection. He passed the first cluster of girls without pausing. Disappointment rippled through them like wind through grass. He was 10 feet from Celia now, 8, 6. Celia's smile widened, triumphant before the victory had even been declared. 4 feet, 2. Kael's gaze slid over Celia as though she were made of glass, seeing through her rather than at her. He kept walking. The shock on her sister's face would have been satisfying if Lyra had time to process it. But Kael's path had shifted, his steps carrying him away from the front line, away from the beautiful females who'd spent hours preparing for this moment. Toward the back, toward the shadows. Toward her. Lyra's breath caught as those golden eyes locked onto hers, and the world contracted to the space between them. Heat flooded her chest, racing down her spine like lightning seeking earth. The bond, she'd read about it, studied it in Benny's books, but nothing had prepared her for this. This recognition that bypassed thought and logic and fear, settling bone deep with a certainty that made her knees weak. Mine. The word echoed in her head, primal and absolute, and she didn't know if it came from her wolf or his. Kael stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could smell cedar and smoke on his skin. He was even more devastating up close, not handsome, exactly, but compelling in a way that made her want to either run or surrender. His hand extended toward her, steady and sure. "You," he said, his voice carrying across the silent clearing. "I choose you." Chapter 4. The Choosing. Lyra stared at Kael's outstretched hand, her mind struggling to reconcile what her body already knew. The bond hummed between them like a living thing, warm and insistent, pulling her forward even as shock rooted her feet to the ground. His hand remained steady, patient, as though he had all the time in the world to wait for her decision, even as the ceremony grounds held its collective breath. She lifted her hand, roughened from years of scrubbing floors, scarred from kitchen knives and thorns, and placed it in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and calloused, and the bond flared so bright she gasped. It wasn't gentle. It was recognition and claim and promise all at once, searing through her chest and settling into her bones like she'd been incomplete her entire life and hadn't known it. "No." Celia's scream shattered the silence like a rock through ice. She lunged forward, her beautiful face twisted into something ugly and desperate. "This is a mistake. She's nothing. She's wolfless." The crowd erupted. "The Alpha King has lost his mind. That's the Ashford disgrace. Everyone knows she's defective. She can't even shift. How can she be Luna?" Their voices crashed over Lyra in waves, but Kael's hand tightened around hers, anchoring her. He hadn't looked away from her face, even as chaos bloomed around them. "Alpha King Kael." A man pushed through the crowd, older, gray-haired, his bearing screaming authority, the beta. "With respect, you cannot choose this female. She has no wolf. The pack will never accept." "Enough!" Kael's voice didn't rise, but it cut through the noise like a blade through flesh. The clearing fell silent so abruptly that Lyra heard her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Kael turned slowly, deliberately, his gaze sweeping across the assembled wolves. His hand never left Lyra's. "I am Alpha King of the Northern Territories," he said, each word precise and heavy as iron. "I have led our packs through war and famine. I have defended our borders and strengthened our bloodlines. I have earned my position through strength, strategy, and the trust of every wolf who calls me leader." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Do any of you truly believe I would make this choice lightly?" No one answered. Even Celia had gone silent, though her face burned with humiliation and rage. The beta shifted uncomfortably. "Alpha, we only wish to—" "You wish to question my judgment." Kael's tone could have frozen fire. "You wish to tell me that the bond I feel, the bond the moon herself has decreed, is somehow wrong because this female doesn't fit your limited understanding of worthiness." Lyra's father materialized from the crowd, his face purple with fury. "Alpha King, I apologize for my daughter's presumption. She was meant to stay home tonight. She's my mate." Kael's words landed like stones in still water. "And if you speak another word about her in that tone, you'll discover exactly how protective I am of what belongs to me." The threat hung in the air, unmistakable. Lyra's father stumbled backward, his mouth working soundlessly. Her mother appeared beside him, desperation making her voice high and thin. "Please, you don't understand. She's been examined by healers. She has no wolf. She'll never be able to fulfill the duties of—" "What I understand," Kael interrupted, his voice dropping to something low and dangerous, "is that you've spent years treating your daughter as though she were disposable. What I understand is that the moon doesn't make mistakes with mate bonds, regardless of what small-minded wolves believe." He turned back to Lyra, and his expression softened fractionally. "What I understand is that I've found exactly who I was meant to find." The bond pulsed between them, and Lyra felt something crack open in her chest, not breaking, but blooming. This male, this powerful alpha who could have chosen anyone, had looked past every beautiful female in the territory and seen her. Not despite who she was, but because of it. "The choice is made," Kael announced, addressing the crowd once more. "This is Lyra, my mate and your future Luna. Anyone who wishes to contest this can challenge me directly." His smile was all teeth. "I welcome the attempt." Silence. No one moved. No one dared. Celia made a sound like a wounded animal, tears streaming down her face. Not of sadness, Lyra realized, but pure rage. All those years of primping and preening, of being told she was destined for greatness, shattered in an instant. Their eyes met across the clearing, and Lyra saw her sister's hatred crystallize into something sharp and permanent. Good, let her hate. Let them all hate. Lyra had survived worse than their disapproval. "The claiming ritual," the beta said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "There are formalities that must be observed." "Then observe them." Kael's thumb traced across Lyra's knuckles, the gesture almost absent, as though he couldn't help touching her. "We proceed tonight." Lyra found her voice for the first time since he'd chosen her. "I accept." The words came out stronger than she'd expected, ringing clear across the grounds. "I accept the bond and the claim." Kael's eyes flashed gold, and something fierce and possessive crossed his face. "Then let's give them something to remember." He pulled her closer, and Lyra went willingly, her wolf rising to meet his with a certainty that felt like coming home. Around them, the crowd murmured and whispered, shock giving way to curiosity. They had no idea what was coming, but Lyra did. And she was ready to show them exactly what they'd overlooked. Chapter 5, The Revelation. The claiming ritual required fire and witnesses, blood and declaration. The beta moved mechanically through the preparations, his disapproval written in every stiff gesture as he rekindled the ceremonial flames at the circle's center. Lyra stood beside Kael, acutely aware of every eye boring into her back. She could hear the whispers, feel the weight of their judgment pressing against her skin like hands trying to push her down. "This will be entertaining," someone muttered, watching her fail in front of everyone. "I almost feel sorry for the Alpha King, the humiliation when she can't shift. Celia should have been chosen. At least she has a wolf." Kael's jaw tightened, but he kept his gaze forward. His hand found the small of Lyra's back, a touch meant only for her. "Ignore them," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "They know nothing." But they would, soon. The beta raised his hands and the crowd quieted. "The claiming ritual has 3 parts," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of tradition. "Declaration of intent, demonstration of worthiness, and the blood bond." He looked at Kael with barely concealed doubt. "Alpha King, do you declare this female as your chosen mate before the moon and witnesses?" "I do." Kael's voice rang clear and absolute. The beta's throat worked. "And do you, Lyra Ashford, accept this claim?" "I do." Her voice didn't waver, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "Then we proceed to the demonstration of worthiness." The beta's expression suggested he expected this to end badly. Both parties must shift before the assembled pack, proving their wolves are compatible and strong. This was it. The moment her family had been waiting for, her public humiliation, confirmation of everything they'd said about her. Lyra's mother had gone pale, her hand pressed to her mouth as though she might be sick. Her father's face had turned to stone, already bracing for the shame. And Celia watched with naked anticipation, her earlier tears replaced by vindictive hope. Kael stepped back, giving Lyra space. "You don't have to prove anything to them," he said quietly, though she suspected he somehow knew she could. The bond thrummed between them, and she felt his absolute certainty like a shield against her back. But this wasn't about proving anything to them anymore. This was about proving everything to herself. Lyra walked to the center of the circle, her gray dress catching firelight. The flames cast dancing shadows across packed earth that hundreds of wolves had shifted on before her. Sacred ground, honest ground. She closed her eyes and reached for the wolf that had been her secret companion for 4 years. The shift began. Pain lanced through her bones, but she breathed into it, welcomed it, let it transform into something else entirely. Her body remembered every practice session, every midnight run through the forest, every carefully controlled transformation in her locked room. The knowledge Benny's books had given her merged with instinct, and the shift flowed through her like water finding its course. Gasps erupted around the circle. Fur rippled across her skin, not gold like Celia's, not brown or gray like most of the pack. White, pure, pristine white that caught the firelight and threw it back like fresh snow under moonlight. Her bones reformed, powerful and sure, her spine lengthening as 4 legs found purchase on the ground. When Lyra opened her eyes, the world had sharpened into crystalline clarity. She was large, larger than she'd realized in the confines of her room. Her white wolf stood nearly as tall as some of the males in their shifted forms. Her muscles coiled with strength that 4 years of secret practice had honed to perfection. The silence was absolute, deafening. Her father's mouth hung open. Her mother had gone white as death. And Celia, beautiful, perfect Celia, who'd spent her whole life being praised for her adequate golden wolf, looked as though the ground had opened beneath her feet. Lyra's wolf prowled in a slow circle, letting them see. Every powerful stride, every ripple of muscle beneath that snowy coat. The control that let her shift without screaming, without the clumsy struggling most wolves endured their first dozen times. This wasn't a first shift. This was mastery. Kael shifted beside her, his wolf massive and dark as midnight. When he moved to stand at her shoulder, the sight of them together sent a ripple through the crowd. Light and dark, perfectly matched, both radiating a power that made lesser wolves drop their gazes. The beta stared, his earlier certainty crumbling. This is. Kael shifted back first, his human form solidifying with the same effortless grace he brought to everything. Lyra followed, the transformation smooth as silk, and when she stood before them once more in human skin, she met her family's horrified gazes without flinching. "This is Lyra," Kael said, his voice cutting through the shocked silence. "My mate, your Luna." He moved to stand beside her, one hand settling possessively on her waist. "She is stronger than most of you will ever be. She has endured what would have broken lesser wolves, and she will lead beside me with a power you clearly never had the vision to recognize." He turned slowly, his gaze sweeping across every face in the crowd. "Let me be perfectly clear." His voice dropped to something deadly calm. "Anyone who speaks against her, who questions her worth, who treats her with anything less than the respect owed to your Luna will answer to me personally." His smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "And I promise you, my justice will not be gentle." No one moved. No one spoke. Kael looked at Lyra and his expression softened. "Welcome home." Chapter 6, New Beginnings. The palace rose against the dawn sky like something from the books Benny used to smuggle through her window. All gray stone towers and arched windows that caught the first light. Lyra sat in the carriage beside Kael, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from trembling. She hadn't said goodbye to her family. There was nothing left to say. Her father had tried to approach after the ritual, his expression twisted between rage and desperate calculation. "Lyra, perhaps we were too harsh. Family should." Kael had stepped between them, and whatever her father saw in the Alpha King's face made him stumble backward without finishing the sentence. Now the Ashford estate was miles behind them, and Lyra felt nothing. No grief, no relief, just a strange hollowness where 21 years of rejection should have left scars. "You're quiet." Kael's voice pulled her from her thoughts. He'd given her space during the ride, though she felt his gaze on her like a physical touch. "I'm wondering when I'll wake up." The honesty surprised her, but the bond seemed to pull truth from her before she could think to hide it. His mouth quirked. "I've been wondering the same thing, though usually my dreams don't involve Beta Marcus looking like he'd swallowed a hornet." A laugh escaped her before she could stop it, unexpected and rusty from disuse. Kael's expression warmed, and something in her chest loosened fractionally. The carriage rolled through iron gates into a courtyard where servants waited in neat rows. They bowed as Kael descended, then extended hands to help Lyra down. She caught their curious glances, the careful neutrality of their expressions. They were reserving judgment, smart. "Your rooms are in the east wing," Kael said, guiding her up marble steps that gleamed in the morning light. "Adjacent to mine. I thought you might want space to adjust before." He paused, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked almost uncertain. "Before we discuss the more intimate aspects of the bond." Heat flooded her face. She'd been so focused on surviving the ceremony that she hadn't let herself think about what came after, about what being his mate actually meant beyond the public claim. "Thank you," she managed, "for giving me time." His hand found hers, fingers threading through in a gesture that was becoming familiar. "We have time, Lyra. The bond isn't going anywhere." A servant opened the door to her chambers, and Lyra's breath caught. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a space larger than her entire corner of the Ashford estate. A four-poster bed dominated one wall, draped in fabric the color of winter clouds. Bookshelves lined another wall, already filled. A writing desk sat before the windows, and through an open doorway she glimpsed a bathing room with a tub large enough to swim in. "If there's anything you need changed," Kael started. "It's perfect." Her voice broke on the word. Too much. All of this was too much. The beautiful room, his patience, the careful way he watched her as though she might shatter. She'd spent so long being treated like nothing that kindness felt dangerous. Kael's thumb traced across her knuckles. "I'll let you rest. when your belongings arrive. A commotion erupted from the courtyard below. Lyra moved to the window and her heart leapt. Benny stood beside a cart that held a single worn trunk and a handful of cloth-wrapped bundles. She was arguing with a palace guard, her hands on her hips, her voice carrying even through the glass. I don't care about protocol. I'm her friend, and I'm seeing her whether you like it or not. Lyra was moving before she thought, racing down corridors she didn't know, following the sound of Benny's voice. She burst into the courtyard just as the guard reached for Benny's arm. Don't touch her. The command came out sharper than intended, and the guard froze. Benny's head whipped around, and then they were colliding, arms wrapped tight around each other. Benny smelled like the forest and old books and home, and Lyra felt something in her chest crack open. You did it, Benny whispered fiercely. You showed them all. I couldn't have without you. Lyra pulled back, gripping her friend's shoulders. All those books, all those nights. Were nothing compared to what you did with them. Benny's eyes shone. I'm so proud of you. The guard cleared his throat uncomfortably. My lady, we have protocols for visitors. She's not a visitor. Lyra kept her hand on Benny's arm, anchor and lifeline. She's my friend. She goes where I go. Footsteps behind her, and then Kael's presence at her back. Is there a problem? The guard bowed. Alpha King, I was merely explaining. That my mate's friend is welcome here whenever she wishes to visit, Kael finished smoothly. He nodded to Benny. Please bring her belongings inside. The blue guest room, I think, close to the Luna's chambers. Benny's jaw dropped. You don't have to. I insist. Kael's smile was genuine. Anyone important to Lyra is welcome in my home. After Benny was settled and the palace had fallen into afternoon quiet, Kael found Lyra in the library. She'd been running her fingers along book spines, still half convinced this was an elaborate dream. Walk with me. He offered his arm, and she took it, letting him guide her through gardens where roses bloomed despite the late season. Tell me something true, he said suddenly, something you've never told anyone. The request caught her off guard. Why? Because I want to know you, not the wolf they overlooked, not the Luna they'll expect you to become. You. The sincerity in his voice made her chest ache. She looked at their joined hands, at the way his thumb traced absent patterns on her skin. I used to dream about running away, she admitted. Just shifting and running until I found a place where no one knew my name, starting over somewhere I could be anyone. And now she was standing in a palace garden with an Alpha King who looked at her like she mattered. Who'd chosen her when the entire world said he shouldn't. Now I'm terrified, she whispered, that I'll wake up, that this is too good, that you'll realize. That you're exactly who I've been waiting for. Kael stopped walking, turning to face her fully. Lyra, the bond doesn't lie, but more than that, I see you, your strength, your resilience, the way you've survived what would have destroyed others. His hand came up to cup her face, gentle despite his power. I'm the lucky one. She wanted to believe him, desperately wanted to trust that this was real. But 21 years of cruelty had taught her that good things never lasted. Miles away in the Ashford estate, Celia paced her room while their mother wrung her hands. She made fools of us, Celia hissed, all this time. She had a wolf and never said anything. She let us mock her, and now she's Luna while I'm nothing. We have to fix this, her mother said. Find a way to discredit her, prove she's unfit. The Alpha King will see reason eventually, and when he does... When he does, Celia interrupted, her smile cold and sharp, I'll be ready to take what should have been mine from the start. Chapter 7, Claiming Her Power. 3 weeks at the palace, and Lyra still woke expecting to find herself back in that cramped room, the ceremony nothing but a fever dream. But then Kael's scent would drift through the connecting door between their chambers, cedar and smoke and something uniquely him, and reality would settle over her like a cloak. Real. This was real. The whispers in the palace corridors, however, were equally real. Did you hear? The Luna can barely read. That's why she hides in the library. I heard she can't even manage the household staff. The head housekeeper does everything. Poor Alpha King. bound to a mate who doesn't know the first thing about leadership. Lyra recognized Celia's poison in every rumor. Her sister had visited twice under the guise of family reconciliation, smiling sweetly while her eyes catalogued every weakness, every uncertainty. The second visit had ended with Celia loudly expressing concern to several palace ladies about Lyra's limited education and unfortunate upbringing. The sympathy in their eyes had burned worse than outright cruelty. "Ignore them." Benny dropped onto the settee in Lyra's room, scattering the reports Lyra had been studying. "They're jealous." "They're right." Lyra set aside the grain distribution ledger with shaking hands. "I don't know what I'm doing. The housekeeper speaks to me like I'm a child. The council members barely acknowledge me in meetings, and yesterday I mixed up the proper forms of address for visiting dignitaries." "So you're learning. That's not weakness, that's growth." "Celia wouldn't have made those mistakes." "Celia is a viper in silk." Benny's voice hardened. "And she's getting bolder. This morning she was in the market telling anyone who'd listen that the Alpha King seems distant with you, implying the bond is weak." Rage flared hot in Lyra's chest, her wolf rising with a snarl. Distant. Kael, who brought her tea when she studied late into the night, who asked her opinion on council matters and actually listened, who touched her like she was something precious every time he passed. They hadn't completed the mating bond, yet Lyra's fear still held her back, whispers of unworthiness she couldn't quite silence, but distant? Never. "She needs to be stopped," Lyra said quietly. "Finally," Benny grinned. "I was wondering when my friend would remember she has teeth." The council meeting that afternoon was supposed to address border patrols. Instead, Lyra's father stood before the assembled leaders, his expression grave. "I come with concerns about my daughter's suitability," he began, and Lyra's hands clenched beneath the table. "She was raised in difficult circumstances, isolated, without proper preparation for a leadership role, perhaps a trial period with oversight from more experienced." "Are you questioning my judgment?" Kael's voice could have frozen fire. Her father paled. "Of course not, Alpha King. I only worry that Lyra herself might feel overwhelmed, for her own well-being." "Her well-being wasn't your concern when you locked her in a room and worked her like a servant." Lyra stood, her chair scraping against stone, every head turned toward her. "It wasn't your concern when you forbade her from ceremonies, when you allowed others to mock her, when you told her she was worthless." Her father's mouth worked soundlessly. "You want to discuss my preparation?" Lyra's voice rang clear, steady. "I've read every historical text in this library about pack law and governance. I've memorized the lineages of every major family, studied trade routes and resource management, learned the intricate politics you thought I was too stupid to understand." She moved around the table, and her father actually retreated a step. "I've done more in 3 weeks than you thought I could do in a lifetime." "Lyra, please," her mother's voice came from the doorway. She must have arrived with reinforcements. Celia stood beside her, false concern painted across her beautiful face. "We're only trying to help," Celia said sweetly. "This role is so demanding, and we know you're doing your best, but perhaps you should explain to the council why you've been spreading rumors about your Luna." Kael's words dropped like stones. "Did you think I wouldn't hear? That palace walls don't have ears." Celia's mask cracked. "I never." "You told Lady Ashton that Lyra couldn't read. You implied to the Merchant Guild that our bond was weak. You've systematically tried to undermine her authority since the moment she arrived." Kael stood, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Give me one reason I shouldn't exile you for treason." Her mother gasped. Her father went gray, but Celia's face twisted into something ugly and honest. "Because she doesn't deserve this," the words exploded from her. "I'm beautiful, I'm educated, I'm everything a Luna should be. The bond should have chosen me. It's not fair that she gets everything While you what?" Lyra interrupted quietly. "While you have parents who love you, a childhood filled with freedom and praise, every advantage I was denied." She stepped closer, and Celia actually flinched. "You had everything, Celia, everything, but you never had to fight for it. You never had to earn your strength through survival." Silence filled the council room, heavy and absolute. I am Luna, Lyra continued, her voice carrying the weight of every secret shift, every night spent studying while her family celebrated, every moment she'd chosen to become stronger instead of bitter. Not because the bond chose me, not because Kael saw past your cruelty, but because I chose myself first. I chose to be worthy of this role before anyone else recognized it. She turned to address the council, these wolves who'd watched her stumble and judged her lacking. I will make mistakes. I'm still learning. But I will never stop working to be the Luna this pack deserves, and anyone who can't accept that is welcome to leave. No one moved. Kael crossed the room and took her hand, threading their fingers together. My Luna has spoken. His voice carried absolute authority. This matter is closed. As for you, he looked at Lyra's family with barely contained rage. You are no longer welcome in this palace. Leave, now. They fled. That night, Kael found Lyra on her balcony, watching stars emerge in a velvet sky. You were magnificent today, he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Lyra leaned into his warmth, finally letting herself believe this was where she belonged. I was terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear. His lips brushed her temple. It's choosing to act despite it. She turned in his arms, and the bond thrummed between them, not demanding but inviting. She saw her future in his eyes, not perfection but partnership, not rescue but recognition. I'm ready, she whispered. His smile was sunrise breaking. For what? Everything. She pulled him down to meet her kiss and finally, let herself fall into the bond completely. The mating mark blazed to life on her shoulder, silver as moonlight, as permanent as the strength she'd forged from survival. Lyra had stopped being invisible long ago.